All right. Hello, and welcome back to another jam-packed episode of the Hammercast. I am your host, Alex, the Hebrew Hammer Salkin. And joining me today is Mark Manning, and he is a teacher of what exactly we will talk about momentarily. He is a kettlebell enthusiast and also a martial arts enthusiast, and he's done a number of my programs over the years, gone through a variety of my courses, and he has reaped the rewards. And so I thought, you know what? I want to have this guy on because he's had a very interesting story, very interesting approach. And it's also the sort of an approach and a background that I think a lot of people can identify with, but also that people can see is different enough that it can inspire them to continue their own journey forward, upward, and onward. And so we're going to get started in just a minute. Before we do, I would be remiss if I did not mention my 9-minute kettlebell and bodyweight challenge, which is a great starting point if you have never really trained seriously with kettlebells, or even if you have. Likewise with bodyweight, it consists of very simple to learn movements, stuff that you can learn legit in like 30 seconds, because they're full body movements focused on your gait pattern or your walking pattern. Everybody knows how to walk. So it's taking something you already know how to do and turning it into strength building activities. So stuff like loaded carries, crawling, things like that. And what's even better is it's designed to be done in conjunction with your regular training rather than apart from it. So you don't have to put your regular workouts to the side. You either do this at the beginning or the end of your training and reap the rewards. So all you got to do is go to 9minutechallenge.com, get your own free copy if you have not done so already. It is the number 9minutechallenge.com, and that bad boy is all yours. So without further ado, Mark, welcome, and thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So, you and I have been in contact for a long time, and I know we've exchanged emails. We've done some consulting. I know you've done a number of my programs and challenges, and but what I don't know yet, I mean, I know a little bit, but the audience certainly doesn't, is about your origin story, as it were, because I think you're very representative in some sense of a lot of the people who do my programs, in that, you're not a trainer. You're not a fitness professional, although you do have sort of fitness certifications. This is one thing I really like about you, is that you've made it a point to increase your knowledge and go deeper, which is something that I think a lot of people would benefit from. But you don't make a living off of it. You make your living actually as a teacher. So I'm curious, because I think I know what you teach, but I don't want to make any assumptions. What do you teach?
Teach high school level chemistry and toxicology.
That's what I thought. I knew it was science related, because I remember one of our early email exchanges was about people not really knowing what they mean when they say they're like, doing science or believing science or whatever. And it's like, you're just, you're saying silly things. It's a process you got to follow that. So we can talk about that later, but that's very exciting. That's high school chemistry and toxicology, you said.
Correct.
And I have to say, I probably would have been a lot better off having you as a teacher in high school, because I did not understand. I was terrible at science, math, any of the STEM fields, the stuff that you can make real money at. Like, I was just no great shakes at it, but it was very good at humanities stuff. So now I'm more intrigued by the stuff I didn't quite get in high school. One of which actually was also physical activity. But that brings me to the next question is, I think a lot of times people have this view of, let's say, science types, or people who are interested in chemistry or biology, whatever it may be, as being a very cerebral, very like to break a mental sweat, but not a physical sweat. But you can do both. And so were you always into like physical activity, physical culture? Is this something that you just kind of picked up later on in life?
It was something I picked up a little bit later. I mean, when I was in elementary school, I played baseball and basketball and a little bit of judo. But it wasn't until I was about 16. I didn't play any sports in high school. When I was 16, I wasn't on exactly the winning end of a fight, and I did what most kids in the 80s are going to do, run down to a local karate school and they go get my black belt. I'm going to go after that guy, right? Well, of course that didn't happen, but I did. I did start training martial arts in my teens, and then I, in my 20s, I got into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Muay Thai and boxing, and that was really my introduction to athletic endeavors, and that was also my introduction to strength training, because with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu especially, you need that strength foundation. Because I wasn't an athlete in high school, I had to go learn how to, I had to learn how to strength train. And I got a foundation in barbell training at the time. So, I wasn't pursuing only strength training. I was mostly pursuing jujitsu, but doing enough barbell work to get me, to keep me functional on the mat.
And how did you find that impacted your martial arts training? I know that was the goal, meaning you're like, okay, I'm doing jujitsu, I need to get stronger. Did you find that was actually helpful? Did you notice like some, initial spike in your ability level? Was it, yeah, tell me about that.
So one of the things that really stood out was my punching power really went up doing squats and deadlifts, because punching comes from the hip. So I mean, in boxing, my punching power really skyrocketed. As far as jiu-jitsu is concerned, yes and no. I won't say that the barbell training it improved my mat ability, but it didn't translate as much as I hoped it would. But overall, I was still stronger. One of the things that it did do was it sort of accentuated some muscle imbalances that I had developed doing jujitsu and boxing over the years. So I started to get these, minor injuries on, one side of my body or the other from those strength imbalances. So while I had a lot of positive effect from the barbell training, there were also some drawbacks.
Definitely. And I think barbell training is a lot of fun. It's really cool to lift some really heavy weights, but I think your experience is one that a lot of people have had. And I think actually it's especially true of people who are in your age range, which we'll just say is upwards of 40. And I'm not going to, I don't know your exact age, but I'm not going to.
51. It's okay.
51, okay.
Yeah, 51.
And especially because you talked about your youth playing, let's say, baseball and judo and a variety of other activities. These are all, sports in general are all very, they're all very imbalanced activities, meaning it's like very little of what you would do in any given sport is going to be, let's say, bilateral, where it's like you're doing an equal amount of work with both arms, with both legs, or with the upper body and the lower body. And so I think, one of the issues that people end up having with strength training in general, if they don't know what those issues are, is like you said, they just end up accentuating it. They get stronger at the things they're already strong at, and they bring up their weaknesses too, but it's maybe in equal measure up until the point where the stronger side can't keep up, and because it's doing so much more work than what the weaker side is doing. Is that basically what your experience was?
Yes, and I just want to reel back for a second and say, it wasn't, I wasn't knocking barbell training. Barbell training was,
definitely.
I made incredible gains. I was very happy with it, but it sort of did accentuate some of those muscle imbalances, and that's sort of where the problems began.
Yeah.
So
that's the case for. I think it's the case for a lot of people. Yeah, Mark Rifkin, who's a retired master SFG. He was a powerlifting champion back in the day. And in addition to a variety of other things, he was a bodybuilder, competitive bodybuilder, gymnast, etc. And he said the same thing. He likes barbell training, and even now he's in his 60s and he's, military pressing upwards of 200 pounds, despite a variety of injuries that he has had. And so he's definitely a fan of the barbell, but he said the same thing. He says the barbell always wins because you can always add more weight to the bar, but your body can't necessarily handle the extra weight that you're adding. And so I think that, people who are interested in barbell training should definitely pursue it, but they should also be very, very regimented about seeking and destroying their weaknesses and their imbalances, because if they don't, those things are going to be like, the leak that gets into the side of the ship that, you end up having to send people down there with buckets to try to, throw the water out, as it were. So 100%. I think barbell training is a lot of fun, but that is one, we'll say, hazard of it that a lot of people don't really think much about, is that you have to prepare for barbell training. Barbell training a lot of times doesn't necessarily prepare you, at least ad infinitum, the way that certain other modalities come a little bit closer to, in my opinion. Now, I'm curious then, because we talked about barbell training. We have kind of in some way like a parallel exposure to strength training, because I started my real foray into actually being very interested in physical culture was through Muay Thai when I was 19. And then, a friend of mine who got me into it was into bodybuilding. And so he showed me some bodybuilding movements. Nothing for the legs, obviously, because, I kicked enough in Muay Thai. We did, like burpees and stuff like that. So I thought my legs were getting plenty of work. But the upper body, no way. I needed more. And one of the things that I decided is I wanted to keep finding new ways to get stronger and better. And for me, that's when it eventually led me to the kettlebell through a long kind of, arc, let's say. But how did you discover the kettlebell? Given that you had this background with, various different sports and physical activities and so on and so forth, and then you get into barbell training, where did the kettlebell fit into all that?
So, as I mentioned, I had developed these strength imbalances and finally got to the point where these became injuries.
Yeah.
They were minor, but it was these nagging pains here and there. So I went to a physical therapist here in New Jersey, and he did an assessment, and he found some imbalances. And his name is Dr. Leo Galati. He's either an RKC or an HKC, and he showed me some kettlebell movements. And it was funny because the kettlebells were very light. I kind of looked at them. I was like, okay, 10 or 12 pound, 15 pound kettlebells. Sure, but I'm going to do exactly, I'm very disciplined. I'm going to do exactly what the doctor tells me. Well, the results were really, really, really remarkable. It really closed some of those weaknesses, some of those imbalances. And it made it so that my barbell training, I was back on track with the barbell training. I was making more progress than I ever had. And then I really became immersed in the kettlebell training during the pandemic in 2020. Before March of 2020, when everything shut down, I was doing a lot of Muay Thai. I was still doing some kettlebell work because I loved it. But once everything shut down, of course, there were no gyms. I couldn't go to the gym. I'm sorry, all the gyms were closed. I couldn't go to any of them. Still wanted to get the workouts. So what I did was I ordered a bunch of kettlebells. And I was very fortunate to find a coach. Her name is Katia Silva. She's in my area. She was a SFG, I believe SFG2, and also certified under Phil Scarito. And she coached me through all of the basic grinds and ballistics that we know as the kettlebell foundation. And I owe so much to her, and also so much to Dr. Galati, because they gave me this foundation to go forward in the basics. And Katia's strength, she was just remarkable with cueing. I mean, she was just remarkable with, I would be doing something, a swing or something like that, and I think, well, this doesn't feel exactly right, and right away she'd push harder through the floor. Or I'd be in the middle of a Turkish get up and say, I want your knee just 2 inches to the left. It was just remarkable. So it gave me that technical foundation to continue to go forward. And she inspired me a lot. And what happened was I went on the Simple and Sinister program because I had the tools to do it. And at the same time, I started thinking, I'm the type who needs a goal. I want a goal, something to work towards. So I thought, what if I just looked and saw what kind of certifications were available for kettlebells? Well, sure enough, the HKC was available. It was an 8-hour certification, and it was delivered in November of 2020 by Mike Krivka, who was a master RKC. Mm-hmm. And his ability to coach is also really remarkable. I learned a lot from him. And over the course of time, I continued working with the kettlebells, continued using them. And Katia works with Phil Scarito, who was a master RKC, master SFG, who now has his own cert. So she hooked me up with Phil, and I actually went and I got certified under Phil. So this is my foundation now with the kettlebell technique and programming.
That's fantastic. And, like I said, one of the things that I think is great about you, and this makes sense because you're an educator, is that you want to continue your education. I think sometimes people view that kind of like continuing education as, maybe it's from their schooling days where they viewed it as something they had to do, as opposed to something where it's like, it's a joy to learn how to do these things and to actually add to your skills, which is great. Now, when you started training a little bit more seriously with kettlebells, and that became more of your focus, what were some of the changes that you noticed in your strength, in your conditioning, your mobility, et cetera?
I practically sprung out of bed. I mean, at the time I was 48 years old, and I mean, I hadn't felt like this in years. I mean, when I trained jujitsu and trained barbell work, no matter how much stretching I did, I would get out of bed the next morning and I would be bent over like a question mark. My posture was not really good. My mobility was nowhere near as good as it should have been. As a matter of fact, quick story. The physical therapist who did the mobility assessment on me ran an FMS assessment, and in 2000, I want to make sure I get the years right. I think it was 2017 when I first started going to them. Before they showed me the kettlebell stuff, I scored a 78% on the FMS, functional movement screen.
Now, for people who aren't familiar, FMS runs on a system where 21 is the maximum you can get. And so it's like, basically, I think there are 7 major movement patterns that they test, and with a particular skill, and then you get a 0 if there's pain, a 1 if it's just real crap, 2 is kind of like the baseline, or like acceptable level, we'll say average, and then 3 is like exceptional, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not FMS certified, but I think I know a little bit about it. Is that correct? Just so we kind of give people some background.
I can't speak authoritatively on a system. Hopefully, it might have been FMS coupled with something else.
Okay.
But it was. I know part of it was FMS. It was like a really, really, really funky game of Twister.
Yeah. Very much so.
Yeah. So back in 2017, when I was at the height of the barbell, work and doing the jujitsu and the Muay Thai, I scored a 78%. The pandemic hit. I only did kettlebell work. I really only did simple and sinister. I did the goblet squats, the Turkish get-ups, the swings, as well as anything that Katya added. So she did teach me how to do some cleans. She was a big fan of half kneeling presses, half kneeling windmills. I went back to get another screen, the exact same screen, and I scored a 92.
Impressive.
So, I mean, there's the proof right there. My mobility went up, my strength went up. I wasn't on the mat after that, so I can't say that my mat strength went up, but I felt springy. I felt like, instead of, I'm not sure I'm articulating this well, my body felt like one complete piece that all parts were linked together.
That's a very good way of describing it too, because I was going to make the joke earlier when you said that you could spring out of bed now versus when you were training with the barbell and jujitsu and stuff. I was going to make the joke about having to wake up in sections. Like first you're like, oh, you got to kind of reach over, and then you just slowly lurch upward. But that's a very good analogy, because one of the things that people understand is I think maybe it's through marketing or whatever, but they understand full body exercise, that there's some sort of a benefit to it. And even if they can't really articulate what it is, like, they can understand why it would be beneficial. And the whole purpose behind, let's say, full body exercise is to strengthen your full body, but more importantly, to make sure that it's all connected, so that when you're doing movements like, let's say, push-ups, it's not like your low back is sagging and your shoulders are shrugging, and it's like you're just a bunch of, like, a bundle of disconnected parts. You're actually one solid unit, and you know how to call upon all these assistance units, let's say, like the midsection and the glutes and the quads and stuff like that, in order to get you to do something as simple as even a push-up. And a lot of people don't really realize the value of doing that and the importance of doing that. And so that's a perfect example. It's a huge improvement in something that you weren't actually training for directly, meaning going from, like you said, the 78% to a 92% simply by doing these natural movements with the kettlebell. That's a pretty big leap.
Yep. Yeah, it was remarkable. When he sent me the results, I was like, this is great. I mean, I knew I felt better, but seeing it measured, seeing the metrics applied was just, it was really, and he was so excited about it.
That's what you need, by the way, is you need like PTs and chiropractors who are actually excited about your success. Like when you succeed or you improve on something, they're very, very happy about that sort of thing. So that's very cool. Well, then I have to wonder then, or I'm very curious, is when did you discover my material and how also? Because we never really mentioned that. So was it like, as an article that I wrote or social media or something on those lines?
That's a good question. I think so. When I got the HKC certification, I did have the intention of teaching one day. And last year I did teach. I taught 7 months before the gym. I was at a gym that actually closed down. Otherwise, I would still be doing it. But I did have a class, and I was in a hoarding phase. I was in a phase where I was hoarding as much information as I could from competent people, so that I could not take it and pass it directly to students, because I want to absorb it myself.
Yeah.
I want to make myself the best that I can be, to then offer it to the students. So I was in a hoarding phase for information. You mentioned science and scientific thinking. What I wanted to do is I wanted to absorb as much information from as many different sources as possible, and basically work through those pieces. So exactly where I found you, I don't know. I think it may have been through the Strong First forum. But I can't say for sure. All I know is that I do remember signing up for your newsletter, and I don't think it was from the 9-minute challenge. It was from something else, but I do remember signing up for your newsletter, which I absolutely love.
Cool.
And I love everything you put out, because your insight, your passion for this is it's a tremendous benefit to all of us who are doing this. So I definitely wanted to make sure I made that connection.
Well, I appreciate that. And yeah, I think I like the way that you started to describe your approach to being able to help your students, was that, you wanted to absorb all this information so that you could then pass it along to them. And I think that it very much mirrors what I try to do, where I look at sources, as varied as, old school bodybuilding, to, powerlifting, to physical therapy and all these other things. And then I try to find connections that I think are going to help the students, even if it's just as simple as a story, like so-and-so did this, and, this is what happened or what have you, versus, here's a movement that is commonly done by gymnasts, to make sure they prepare their shoulders. And it's something you don't need any specific, let's say, equipment for. You can just do it, on your own, but it also might help fill in a gap with this, that, or the other thing. I think it's important, if you're going to be an educator, is you've also got to be a filterer. You got to be able to find a lot of different material, sift through it, and be able to determine what is going to be helpful for, let's say, this group of students versus this one, and what do they just not need, or what do they not need yet. And yeah, it's something I'm very enthusiastic about, because I as we were discussing before the call, I principally see myself as like a problem solver. Like I grew up very unathletic, very uncoordinated, weak, and just, all the stuff that I found out there didn't really speak to me in terms of fitness. And so having to distill it down into something that's actually useful to me is like, or to others rather, is very much a passion for me. Now, here's the other thing that I'm curious about. Given that you've had the background that you've had, and you've actually made it a point to seek further education with your, kettlebell training and your physical fitness. I remember some time back you bought a copy of Kettlebell Mastery,
Yes.
and you had like a rave review about it. I saved it because I liked it so much, and I want to let you talk about it a little bit, because I thought your experience with it was exactly what I'd hoped people would have from the course. So talk a little bit on that, if you wouldn't mind.
Oh boy, where do I start about kettlebell mastery? Okay, so the thing that I really liked about kettlebell mastery, and by the way, I've been dipping into kettlebell mastery since I wrote that rave review. So I probably have even more to say about it now than I did before. The really nice thing about kettlebell mastery is that it is a bird's eye view of a linear curriculum. It's an overview. And I know that you're fond of that. And that is extremely helpful for like when we've done consultations, you've said, let's take a bird's eye view of this. And I think that's incredibly helpful for people to see the whole picture first before going forward into the pieces. Mm-hmm. And I'm inclined to make an analogy, and I hope it's a good one, because I'm doing it on the fly, but it's kind of like navigating. right? So if you have someone sitting in the passenger seat of your car and they're saying, "We'll turn here," okay, we'll turn here, go 3 miles and turn here. I mean, it's valuable, but it's not as valuable as knowing where you're going, knowing what your destination is, and knowing the map and the roads and everything on the way up there. So, then you understand what, because I live in New Jersey, I have to use New Jersey highways, but I know why I'm taking the Garden State Parkway north to 17
Sure.
to, Interstate, 87 north instead of south. Sorry, but hopefully that was a good analogy, but I think
Well,
it's a really, I think it's great to have that bird's eye view, and also it's a linear curriculum. And
mhm.
as a teacher, I really like that, because when you have the bird's eye view coupled with the linear curriculum, what happens is it gives people confidence when they are navigating their own path, because as you know, there are always going to be setbacks, there are always going to be obstacles, they're going to be, I mean, no matter what, there are going to be like little nagging injuries and things like that. And it gives people confidence and insight to maintain the path if they can see what their destination is. All right. So that's just my general comment on kettlebell mastery. Some of my specific comments, some of the things I really like about it are, I really like how it's not just a standalone, here's how you do the swing, here's how you do the Turkish get up, here's how you do this exercise, this exercise. I like how you pair things. I think there's a tremendous amount of value in some of those pairings. I've tried them. I was really surprised with the results. Taking an example that's not sure I saw this in Kettlebell Mastery or not, but I know you've mentioned it in some of your newsletters. 20 years ago, if you'd said to me, okay, what's the primary mover in the shoulder press? I'd say, well, the shoulder muscle. And then 5 years ago, when I got a little more insight, I'd say, oh, well, the latissimus dorsi is definitely, but I never realized that, how much the glutes have to do with the press, right? So little things like that you have included in Kettlebell Mastery to give you that insight, I think is also tremendously helpful. I like how you have I like how you address programming as not just looking at sets, reps, and overall volume, but how you talk about the importance of technique, how you talk about, I mean, again, I don't want to paraphrase in any way, but I remember the one story that was in there of the person who did the one squat, the West Side Barbell program, who, they did one squat, but unracking it was a rep, stepping back was a rep, doing the full squat was a rep. So just that time under tension and that attention to focus on technique, gave me the insight that, if I do 3 reps and I do them perfectly, it's much better than doing six reps half-heartedly. And I mean, we all know that, but do we forget that along the way? And I think we do, and we're told do 3 sets of 5. So I really, really like that. Hopefully I'm not repeating myself. I really like the way that you pair things. I think I mentioned that already. The programming insights, all of it is great. Oh, and the troubleshooting and the cues. So the troubleshooting piece, I think, is great, because we can't always have the benefit of having a coach right there, right? We try something, it feels wonky. We don't want to push through and get injured, and we don't just want to just give it up. So having the cues there are great. And then also having the preparatory movements. For example, do you mind if I use an example from?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and I know this has been in your newsletter too, but for Turkish get-ups, the original strength roll, before, and the way you say that the Turkish get-up is, think of it as a Turkish roll-up, right? And and I've been taught how to do Turkish get-ups by people who really know how to do a Turkish get-up, and they've said that to me, but they've never said it in terms of it's a Turkish roll-up. And there's, that original strength reset in the beginning that just makes it just adds, without putting together any corny analogies, but it's like turbocharging your engine. I mean, it makes it that much better. It really makes it that much better. So those are a couple of my comments on Kettlebell Mastery. I think it's a great resource. Of all the resources, I mentioned I'm in a hoarding phase. Of all the resources that I put together, I think Kettlebell Mastery would be the one that I go back to again and again. And, once again, I want to repeat, I'm not just taking this and handing it right to my students. I'm absorbing this on my path, because
Mhm.
I can't be a good teacher unless I go down this path myself, right? So I have to take all these things, absorb them, and then, and then be the best teacher I can be. But, this is, I mean, just being honest, it's my top resource.
No,
Of
that's
all the
cool.
resources that I've hoarded for this, and sorry, I this that I didn't get from my certifications. I have
Sure.
to I have to be fair to, the people who gave me the resources for the certifications. I mean, but this is of all the ones that I've gotten, it's a great resource. It's a great resource for people who are early in the path and for people who are further down the road.
No, that's great. That's very good to hear. And I think that one of the things in particular that I'm glad that you grasp is the importance of all the individual elements within it so that, people can see it because it is ostensibly meant to be read from start to end, and then there's, of course, the 6-week program that's in there as well. But it's also something that can be read in bits and pieces. Like, you can go through it even if you have a pretty good familiarity with kettlebell training and you can say, gosh, you know what, I keep noticing I'm doing this or that. And then there's my aim is to try to cover the most common mistakes and how to, potentially eliminate them, like you pointed
Mhm.
out, as well as offering ideas on assistance exercises, which is really something you don't see much in the kettlebell or bodyweight world. It's very strange. You really only see it in honestly, not even really in powerlifting anymore. It used to be, with the exception of like West Side, it used to be that um, it was just common knowledge. It's like, okay, you're going to do some like your main exercises, but then you're going to do some assistance ones that are going to help you out. And for whatever reason, like the strength world as a whole, not in its entirety, but by and large, has kind of abandoned this idea of using assistance exercises and other things like that to help you get better at the skill you're trying to improve. And if you're trying to improve, like, let's say a military press, there are a lot of things that go into that. There's the mobility aspect of it. There's also the let's say assistance muscles that go into it. You mentioned the lat, the glutes. Likewise, mobility. You got to think about how your shoulder blade moves. How well your thoracic spine can extend, things like that. And there's really a very little attention placed on a lot of that sort of a thing, and kind of an over focus on progressions. And I definitely cover progressions in there. There's no question about that. There are plenty of them for each movement. But I think a lot of people are like, okay, just give them progressions, and if that doesn't work, just think of something different. Oh, are we back now?
Yeah, that was a long drop off. We might have
Yes.
to
What was
we have to click.
So for those of you listening, I was telling Mark ahead of time, regardless of the fact that I pay a pretty penny for my internet service, somehow because they're one of the only games in town, they don't really seem to care if the internet drops out periodically. So I guess it's a perk of being one of the only games in town. But what was the last thing you heard me say so that I can just pick up more or less where we left off?
You froze again.
Oh, how about
Oh,
now?
there you are. There you are.
Great.
You were talking about assistance exercises and the value of assistance exercises, and you were specifically talking about the military press,
Mm,
thoracic extension. I
sure.
think that's where you started to drop off, right around thoracic extension.
Okay, cool. So if I repeat myself, I'm sure the audience will forgive me. But yeah, I think that's one of the things that is woefully missing from a lot of strength training nowadays. It was almost never there, really, as far as I can tell, in terms of the kettlebell and calisthenic side of the strength training equation. But even in places where it used to be more common to see like assistance exercises, like powerlifting and so on and so forth, a lot of people have just kind of dropped it out. And I think that it's um, a well-intended but misguided approach to training. So one of the things that I wanted to make sure that I put into kettlebell mastery was kind of return the glory to assistance exercises as like an indelible part of successful training over the long haul. Because what ends up happening with a lot of people is if they don't just jump from thing to thing and then get nowhere, which is also common. A lot of times people just jump onto fads and
Mhm.
they just don't really make any real impressive progress in one direction or another. And the other thing that might happen is that they find the thing that they like and then they do it to death. And then there's just similarly, there's no real progress because there's they're not fixing their weak links. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And I'm sorry. I hopefully I didn't I think I might have overlooked that with the kettlebell mastery. You do
Not at all.
address
Not at all. There's
Okay.
a lot in there. I think that you covered it because you talked about, because part of it is the mobility side of the equation, part of it is the assistance drill, part of the equation. There's a lot of stuff in there that's meant to be the sort of a thing that you can do what you're doing. You go back periodically, reread it, reapply things, try new things, and then you find, okay, when do I need to do this? Where do I need to do it? And, in your case also, how do I apply that to the people that I'm helping? Because they're not always going to need every single element to be focused on, but sometimes there's going to be one thing in particular that you're like, aha, okay, you need to focus on this, and here's exactly how we're going to do it. And then bam, the improvement takes place, which is exactly what you could hope for.
Right.
So very cool. Now, you one other thing too I was going to mention is you talked about consultations that we've done, and we did one not too long ago, and you were I think kind of at like an impasse in your training where you're like, like, can I continue to make progress? Am I just going to be stuck here? And we did some avant-garde stuff, and it seemed like it moved you in the right direction. And so
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
tell us a little about that.
Well, I think we get caught in. I think we get caught in ruts. I mean, I was back working with barbells. I was making good progress. I was on a 3x5 program with basic barbell movements, and there were some kettlebell movements in there as well, but it was primarily barbell movements. And I was making good progress, and then suddenly I wasn't, and there were some minor injuries that were starting to occur. And yeah, I wanted to contact you to see what your thoughts were, because I want to move forward. And yeah, it was really remarkable. You again, you talked about that bird's eye view, which was very, very helpful. You suggested taking that 6 to 8 week leap of faith, where step away from the rut, step away from the big movements that I'm not making as much progress in, and do some assistance work as well as some things to bring everything together. Mm-hmm. And I think that was my favorite part, was how much stronger I got in that third block of exercises where we brought things together. The assistance exercises worked very well too. I haven't gone back to the barbell movements yet. That's going to be, I think that's going to probably be after this current program, after this current consultation. But everything's been great. I mean, it's everything that I wanted it to be. I put on more muscle. I put on about 4 pounds of muscle, which is, for somebody who's 51, it's not, it's muscle. Sure. For somebody who's 51 years old, that's pretty good over the course of 8 weeks. I'm very, very happy with the results, and I look forward to going back and giving another shot to the barbell work.
Right on. Very cool. Yeah, I remember there was a funny line that you said when you sent me an email on it, and you said it was like, in particular, you said your glutes got a lot stronger and they got like noticeably, more shapely, and you said it was like how Mark got his glutes back.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, I guess it's awkward for me to say in a podcast, but yeah, it was noticeable. Like I said to my wife, I'm like, hey, look at this. And she's like, oh yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it's
men forget that women like a good set of glutes on a guy. I think most guys think, oh, I gotta have the upper body. This is why you see the guys who don't train legs, and then you on the corollary to that is you see women who don't train the upper body, because they understand that like guys like a shapely lower body, and they don't think as much about the upper body. And then with guys, it's the reverse. They think, okay, well, the women want to see, obviously a well-developed upper body, but they don't think about the lower body. You gotta have them both. And
yes,
yeah,
I agree,
100%. And incidentally too, for a lot of people, this would be worth thinking about. It's more than likely going to be helpful too with your martial arts training, because your glutes are very important. I mean, they're hip extensors, and so your ability to extend your hips is going to be very important for striking. It's going to be very important for all manner of different things, as well as just putting your will on your opponent when you're training. So
yeah, I really look forward to seeing how this translates, especially low bar back squats and
definitely.
deadlifts, because I really think it's going to help a lot. But yeah,
Yeah.
there's definitely more muscle there for sure.
Good.
For sure.
Absolutely. Gentlemen, listen closely, because Mark is, he's telling you the 10 commandments of gains. One of them, you got to have good lower body development.
Yeah, man.
Just, there's
I
no way
agree.
around it. Now, I don't know if you keep a social media profile or anything like that where people can follow you, but if you do, where can people follow you? And if they can't follow you, what would your parting words of advice be for them?
Well, I guess it depends on where they are on their journey. I mean, I still consider myself very early in my journey. I've only been working with kettlebells I've been working with them for, I guess, 3 solid years now. I guess my parting words of advice for people would be, stay with it. Consistency trumps everything. Take care of the injuries. Take care of your body, listen to your body. Don't find things that work and progress on them. Find yourself a good coach. Invest in yourself. Don't cut corners. Don't cut corners with, investing in coaching, proper equipment. Surround yourself with people who are stronger than you, who inspire you. If you're the only strong guy in your gym, if you're going to a gym where people aren't serious, you're not going to have the benefit of that community. And it's great. I mean, I took my sons to an Olympic weightlifting gym. We were down there, we were down there for a while. And I mean, every one of these, the women, everybody was stronger than me. And it was like, I love this. I mean, it wasn't disheartening at all. It was inspiring. So I think it's, tap into your passion for this and understand, the investment that you're making will last a lifetime. So, I mean, for people who are in their 20s and their 30s, you're going to get stronger. You're going to reap a lot of benefits and a lot of rewards, but you're also going to reap a lot of benefits and rewards in your 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. You don't trash your body. You're going to be independent your whole life. You might not live longer, but you're going to live better. So for me, for my age cohort, I don't want to, let me just say that, I feel the positive benefits of strength training, and I can do things. Without even blinking, I could still do things I could do when I was 25. And I attribute that all to strength training. So stay the course, make it a lifetime pursuit, invest in yourself, get a good coach, stay with it.
Amen.
And research. Sorry, just one last thing.
Sure. Yeah.
I think one of the things that keeps people on the path is to research not only the physical benefits, but also the mental, emotional. I don't say this in a religious way, but also the spiritual benefits. There are so many benefits to strength training. And if you find yourself in a rut, if you find yourself disheartened with your progress, just take a minute to Google the benefits of all these things, and you'll see how good it is for every aspect of your life.
Absolutely.
And good luck.
Absolutely. I couldn't think of a better piece of advice to give. And again, it makes perfect sense coming from somebody who takes his research very, very seriously. You don't have to put on a lab coat or anything like that. All you got to do is start to look for the obvious stuff like you were talking about, start to apply it, and then start to notice it as it starts to happen to you, because experiencing is really believing, not just reading, but actually experiencing it. And you mentioned this earlier too. There's a certain leap of faith that you're going to have to do. But if you are following a well-trod path, that leap of faith will be much easier. You're still going to have to do the hard work, but it will be a lot easier to know exactly that you can expect to get to your destination on time. So, Mark, thank you very much for joining me on this podcast.
Thank you for having me.
And folks, as always, have fun and happy training.